Welcome to Life Stories, where real experiences unfold, teaching us about resilience, love, and the power to start over. Today's story follows Emma, a dedicated nurse who believed in love and marriage, until she found herself trapped in a toxic home. Burdened by an overbearing mother-in-law and a neglectful husband. Just when she thought she had no way out, an unexpected ally stepped in, changing her life forever. What happens when the truth is finally revealed? Stay with us to find out. Subscribe to Life Stories to begin today's journey. My name is Emma Carter, and I used to believe in love. At 32, I thought marriage was about partnership. About two people building a life together, supporting each other through the highs and lows. A year ago, I married Ryan Thompson, 3 years my senior, and I was filled with hope. I had no idea what I was stepping into. Before our wedding, I worked as a pediatric nurse in a small clinic in downtown Chicago. It wasn't a high-paying job, but it was fulfilling. I loved taking care of children, seeing their smiles, and helping anxious parents feel at ease. But shortly after our wedding, I decided to transfer to a general hospital in the city, St. Mary's, to expand my skills. It was a big change, longer hours, night shifts, but I thought Ryan would be supportive. After all, we were in this together. From the start, Ryan insisted that we move in with his mother, Margaret. She's alone most of the time. He had said, Dad works out of town, and I don't want her to feel abandoned. At first, I thought it was sweet. I imagined a warm home where we'd all take care of each other, where I'd be welcomed as a daughter. I was naive. The reality hit me the very first morning after my first night shift at the hospital. I had barely slept when Margaret's sharp voice cut through my exhaustion. Emma, you're terrible, she snapped as I stumbled into the kitchen, my vision still blurred with sleep. It was 9 a.m., and Ryan was already at work. I had worked from midnight until 8:30 a.m. and was running on fumes. You didn't even make me breakfast. What were you thinking? She continued, her voice loud enough for the neighbors to hear. I frowned, confused. I made breakfast last night before leaving for work. Did Ryan eat it all? She crossed her arms and huffed. That's not the point. A proper wife makes fresh breakfast every morning. Despite my exhaustion, I sighed and started preparing another meal. When I finally placed the food in front of her, she took one bite and scowled. It's too salty. I clenched my jaw but said nothing. I turned to leave, desperate for even an hour of sleep. But her voice stopped me again. Where are you going? You still have dishes to wash. I turned around, forcing myself to stay polite. Margaret, I just finished my shift. Could you please wash them this time? Her expression darkened. Cleaning up is part of cooking, isn't it? And I left the laundry for you too. If you're going to take a break, at least finish your chores first. I swallowed my frustration. I'll do it later. What do you mean, later? You don't have a child to keep you busy, do you? I felt my patience snap. This wasn't about dishes. This was about control. About her making sure I knew my place. But I was too tired to fight. So I did what she asked, silently scrubbing the dishes as my arms ached with exhaustion. As the weeks passed, Margaret's comments became sharper. Her expectations grew. And then came the hints. When you have a child, you can leave the housework to me, she would say with a sly smile. My friend's daughter-in-law got pregnant on her honeymoon. Another one has 3 kids already. I'm so jealous. She wanted grandchildren, and she wanted them now. But no matter what I did, taking supplements, visiting a fertility clinic, I wasn't getting pregnant. One night, I finally worked up the courage to talk to Ryan. The doctor wants us both to come in for a fertility consultation. Can you free up your Saturday morning? His expression turned defensive. Why'd I have to go? You're the one who should get tested. I blinked, startled. Fertility isn't just about me, Ryan. The doctor said we both need to be checked. Ryan scoffed. I'm fine. I don't need tests. I tried to reason with him. Your mom keeps asking why we haven't had kids yet. This could help us find out. Don't talk about my mother like that, he snapped. If we're having trouble, it's probably your fault. I felt my heart drop. Ryan, that's not fair. He pulled the covers over his head. I'm not going. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the floor. This wasn't the man I had married. Or maybe it was. And I had just been too blinded by love to see it. At work, I handled the stress of night shifts. But at home, I had no escape. I was expected to clean, cook, and serve as if my needs didn't matter. I had no rest, no appreciation, no love. Even nurses, people who dedicate their lives to caring for others, are given time to recover. But in this house, I was nothing more than a maid. If I had known that this was what marriage to Ryan meant, I never would have married him. Margaret's 60th birthday was supposed to be a grand celebration. But for me, it was just another exhausting day. As always, I had worked the night shift at St. Mary's Hospital and returned home at dawn. Barely able to keep my eyes open, I had planned to sleep for a few hours. But Margaret had other plans for me. The moment I walked through the door, she handed me a long list of tasks. The guests are arriving at noon. Everything must be perfect, she said, her voice laced with expectation. I glanced at the paper, my head spinning. The menu was elaborate, handwritten by Margaret herself, and she had even specified the brand of wine in the order in which the food should be served. I forced a tired smile. Margaret, I just finished a long shift. Can't we simplify the menu a little? She scoffed. Excuses again? Do you think I didn't handle housework when I was your age? I didn't sleep in like a lazy woman. I bit my tongue, knowing that arguing would be useless. With a heavy sigh, I set to work, preparing the food while my mother-in-law dressed up for her grand event. By noon, guests started arriving, filling the house with laughter and clinking glasses. Margaret, draped in an elegant dress, beamed as she entertained them. Meanwhile, I was in the kitchen, struggling to finish the last dish. Then came Ryan's voice, sharp and impatient. What are you doing, Emma? You're late. Mom is waiting for the food. I turned to him, gripping the edge of the counter. I'm doing my best, Ryan. I've been cooking all morning after a full night shift. But he wasn't listening. His brows furrowed as he pointed at the half-prepared dish. You can't even cook properly. Bring the food out now. Before I could respond, he grabbed a bottle of wine and stormed off, leaving me seething with frustration. At that moment, a stack of plates, hastily arranged on the table, toppled over and crashed onto the floor. The sharp sound echoed through the kitchen, and my heart clenched in panic. These were Margaret's prized plates. Ryan reappeared at the doorway, his expression calm, almost indifferent. That's your fault, he stated flatly. You shouldn't have stacked them like that. He didn't help. He didn't ask if I was okay. He simply walked away, leaving me crouched on the floor, picking up broken shards with trembling hands. A voice interrupted my misery. Emma? I turned and saw Richard, my father-in-law, standing in the kitchen doorway, a large package in his hands. His eyes widened in shock as he took in the scene, the mess, the piles of food, and most of all, me. Are you hurt? He asked, his voice full of concern. His genuine kindness was a stark contrast to the coldness I had grown used to. Something in my chest tightened, and I had to look away to stop the tears from spilling over. Richard crouched beside me, helping me gather the broken pieces. Then, he looked at the endless dishes and platters spread across the kitchen. Did you do all of this by yourself? I let out a bitter laugh. It happens all the time. He didn't reply immediately, but his face darkened. He took a long, measured breath before standing up. I'm going to ask Margaret what's going on here. You should come too. A chill ran down my spine. His tone was firm, one I had never heard before. I hesitated. The idea of standing in front of Margaret and her guests while Richard questioned her made my stomach twist. I had spent a year avoiding conflict, trying to keep the peace. But as I looked at the mess around me, the broken plates, the piles of food, my shaking hands, I realized I couldn't keep living like this. Richard extended a hand, his expression unreadable. Come on, Emma. I took a deep breath and stood, following him out of the kitchen. The moment we stepped into the living room, all conversations quieted. The guests, dressed in their finest, looked at us in confusion. Margaret, holding a glass of wine, turned with a bright smile, until she saw Richard's face. Oh, there you are, dear, she said, laughing nervously. Everyone, this is my husband. He's been working out of town but came home just for me. The guests murmured polite greetings. But Richard didn't return the pleasantries. Instead, he moved slightly to the side, making sure I was visible to everyone. I'd like to introduce you all to my son's wife, Emma. Margaret frowned. Emma's busy preparing. Richard cut her off with a sharp glance. She's done enough. Margaret's mouth snapped shut. The room felt tense, the air thick with unspoken words. I swallowed, feeling every pair of eyes on me. Richard turned back to his wife. Margaret, why does she look like this? Margaret's expression flickered. Like what? Richard gestured to me. Like she hasn't slept in days. Like she hasn't eaten a full meal in months. Like she's been working herself to the bone for a party she had no business organizing. A few of the guests shifted uncomfortably. Someone whispered, she doesn't look like her wedding photos at all. Margaret huffed, regaining her composure. Oh, Richard, don't be dramatic. Emma changed hospitals recently, and her work schedule is rough. That's why she's tired. Richard's gaze hardened. So all of her co-workers look like this? If so, that would be a clear violation of labor laws. Margaret flinched. That's not. She's been doing all of this alone. Hasn't she? Richard's voice grew sharper. She worked a full night shift. Then came home and cooked an entire feast while you entertained guests? Margaret's silence was answer enough. Richard turned his gaze to Ryan, who had been standing off to the side, avoiding eye contact. And you knew this was happening. Ryan straightened, crossing his arms. It's between Mom and Emma. I don't have anything to do with it. Richard's voice turned icy. Nothing to do with it? What did you vow at your wedding? Ryan? To protect her? To support her? Ryan stammered. Well, I mean, Mom said it was normal for a woman without children to handle these things. Richard shook his head in disgust. You already lost one wife because of this. Have you learned nothing? Ryan's face went red, and my breath caught in my throat. I had known Ryan was divorced before me, but I had never known why. Now, it all made sense. In the weeks that followed, my life changed in ways I never imagined. With Richard's support, and the evidence he had recorded from that evening, I filed for divorce. Ryan tried to fight it, but the truth was undeniable. The court ruled in my favor, recognizing the emotional abuse I had endured for over a year. As expected, Margaret was furious, but her anger only grew when Ryan finally agreed to a fertility test and discovered the truth. He had oligospermia, a condition that severely impacted his ability to conceive. He wasn't just infertile, he had likely been the reason his first marriage ended. Just as mine had. I should have felt vindicated. But all I felt was exhaustion. I no longer cared about proving anything to them. Richard, on the other hand, had seen enough. He filed for divorce from Margaret, unable to forgive her cruelty. With the truth exposed, Margaret's social circle turned on her, and she found herself isolated. She and Ryan moved into a small apartment in the city, far from the life of comfort and control she had once enjoyed. As for me, with time, I healed. Richard introduced me to someone new, a kind, dependable man who truly saw me for who I was. 6 months later, we married, not out of obligation, but out of genuine love and respect. And then, one morning, I received news that filled me with a joy I hadn't felt in years. I was pregnant. I plan to visit Richard soon, to thank him, because if it weren't for him, I might have still been trapped in that toxic life. Sometimes, life gives you second chances. And this time, I was going to live it fully. Subscribe to Life Stories for more inspiring real-life experiences.